Good afternoon, everybody. This presentation is going to talk about the imperfect tense and the uses when and why we use the imperfect. Remember that the imperfect is one of two ways to talk about the past tense in Spanish. These are the endings for AR and ER and IR verbs in the imperfect tense. The imperfect tense is pretty easy because there's only 3 irregulars, which I'm going to show you in the next slide. But here you're going to see the endings for regular AR verbs. We have aba, abas, aba, abamos, aban. And then ER and IR, we have ia, ias, ia, iamos, ian. The only form that takes an accent in the AR verbs is abamos, okay, the nosotros form. And in ER and IR verbs, all of the verbs have an accent over the I. As I told you, there's only 3 irregulars. One of them is ir, the second is ser, and the third one is ver. Go ahead and copy these down. Remember that ir means to go, ser means to be, and ver means to watch. Here's a short practice for you, just to try to conjugate these verbs without you looking at your notes, but if you need to, it's no big deal. Go ahead and pause the video now because I'm going to show you the answers here. The answer for number 1 is caminaba, 2 is eras, 3 vivían, 4 corríamos, 5 iban, 6 veían. Now let's go over the uses of the imperfect. This is where it gets a little bit tricky because we have to figure out when we're telling a story if we're supposed to use the imperfect tense or the preterite tense. And so for my visual people out there, when you're telling a story and you are looking at the timeline of the story, if what you're talking about goes on and on and on and on and there's no specific point that that moment stops or ends, it would be in the imperfect tense. So some examples in English would be she was tall. If I was talking about someone in the past tense and I was saying that she was tall, she wasn't tall for one point of the story. She was tall for forever in the past. So that's why it would be used in the imperfect. Another example, we used to play tag. Okay, this action here went on and on and on and on. There was no point in the story where it stopped and that was the only time we played tag because I used the word used to, meaning it happened over and over again. The third example is they used to go to Florida a lot. Again, I'm using used to, which implies that I've gone to Florida several times in the past, but I don't tell you exactly how many times. The preterite, when I'm telling a story, is used to talk about one exact moment of a story. Okay, so I could actually pinpoint when this happened in my story. So the first one is she went to the store. This is an example. If I was telling you a story, let's say about my mom, and I was describing her in the past and I was saying she was tall, well, I would use the imperfect tense to say she was tall. But if I said she went to the store, I could probably tell you exactly more or less what time she went, what day she went. It's a specific action that took place. My second example is we went to Disney World. Okay, this is a good one to compare with the third example for the imperfect. We went to Disney World once. Okay, it doesn't say that we used to go to Disney World. So let's say I was saying last summer my family and I went to Disney World. I'm giving you an exact time of when we went and it happened only one time. Finally, the third example is the game started. There's no way that a game can start over and over and over and over in the past, so it only happens once, which is why we would use the preterite. We'll get into the preterite a little bit later, but this is a good start for us to compare the imperfect and preterite tenses. Okay, so let's go over more specifically the imperfect tense, when exactly we use it. So the first one is repeated actions. Any action that was habitual or repeated over and over again. So for example, if you're telling someone about yourself in the past and any time you use used to, you would definitely use the imperfect tense. Here are some examples. De pequeño yo iba a IHOP cada domingo. When I was little, I went to IHOP each Sunday. Because I'm telling you I went every single Sunday, there's no way we could figure out exactly how many times we went. It was a habitual action. So that's why I used the imperfect. Second example, yo jugaba con las muñecas de Barbie. I used to play with Barbie dolls. Okay, again, I'm using used to, which implies that it happened over and over. Third, mis amigos y yo jugábamos en el patio de recreo. My friends and I used to play on the playground. Because I'm saying used to, it's in a repeated action without a specific number, which means I would use the imperfect. Second reason we use the imperfect is to describe the condition, state, or characteristics of something in the past. So whenever you're adding details to something or somebody, you would definitely use the imperfect. For example, mi mamá era baja y rubia. My mother was short and blonde. There's no specific time when she was short and blonde. That's how she was in the past. So that's why I would use the imperfect. Yo no querría ir con él. I didn't want to go with him. It was a feeling that I had, a state of mind that I was in at the time. So that's why I would use the imperfect. No te conocía. I didn't know you. It doesn't tell me exactly what point of the history that I didn't know somebody. It's just that I didn't know him. The condition of our relationship was unknown because we didn't know each other. Third, para describir una acción con una duración no especificada, to describe an action that occurred over an unspecified time. The first example, jugaban con los bloques. They were playing with blocks. So let's say I was babysitting and the parents came home and I was telling them exactly what happened while the parents were away. I might say that, well, the kids were playing with blocks. I would say, ellos jugaban con los bloques, unless I gave a specific amount of time. If I said they played with blocks for 1 hour, then I would use the preterite because I'm being specific. Dos, había mucha gente en la casa para la fiesta. There were a lot of people in the house for the party. I'm describing what was going on at the party without being too specific. I'm just describing the condition that the party was in. There were lots of people. Yo hacía la tarea mientras mi hermano tocaba el tambor. I was doing homework while my brother was playing the drums. There's no specific time for either one of these actions, which means it would be in the imperfect. Para describir una acción interrumpida. So for these examples, you're going to see a little bit of the preterite too, okay? So what happens here is when I describe actions that were occurring, but then another action interrupts, we use the imperfect for what was going on, and then the preterite for whatever interrupted. Here's an example. Yo cocinaba cuando sonó el teléfono. I was cooking when the telephone rang. So this was me cooking an unspecified amount of time, but then boom, the telephone rang, meaning this needs to be in the preterite. Second one, nosotros estudiábamos cuando se apagaron las luces. We were studying when the lights turned off. So here we are, we're studying, just minding our own business, but then boom, all of a sudden the lights turn off. This would be in the preterite because it's a specific time of the story. Mi mamá trabajaba cuando yo llegué. My mom was working when I arrived. Same thing. This is what she was doing when something else interrupted her doing that. Para indicar la edad, la hora, o el tiempo en el pasado. Anytime you're telling a story and you're describing your age, the time it was, or the weather when something in a story, okay? So for example, era la una en la tarde. It was 1 in the afternoon. I know this sounds very specific, so you might be thinking, well, shouldn't we use the preterite? But whenever you're telling the time in a story, you just use the imperfect. It's just the rule. Ella tenía 14 años. Again, I know this sounds like a specific detail, but if you're talking about age, use the imperfect. Eran las 5 de la mañana y llovía cuando el accidente ocurrió. Okay? It was 5 in the morning and it was raining when the accident occurred. So this accident interrupted the time and what was going on. So this would be a little bit of last example too, an interrupted action. But again, anytime you use the time and you're talking about the weather, you will speak using the imperfect tense. Okay, go ahead and pause the video here, and I want you to read these two or three sentences and try to guess which use is going on here. So there's 4 questions and only 3 uses. So you're going to use one of the uses twice. Okay, I'm going to pause it here. The next slide will be the answers. Okay. Era medianoche y no había nadie en la pequeña plaza. Julia caminaba lentamente. Era una mujer alta y delgada. So it was midnight. Boom. I'm talking about the time. So that one will definitely be C to describe age, the time, or weather when something happened. No había nadie en la pequeña plaza. There wasn't anyone in the little plaza. That would be B to describe the condition, emotional state, or state of being. So I'm describing what the plaza, what kind of condition the plaza was in. 3. Julia caminaba lentamente. Julia was walking slowly. So I'm describing what was happening over an unspecified amount of time. She was just walking. And then finally, número 4, era una mujer alta y delgada. She was a tall and thin woman, meaning I'm just describing her. I'm describing what her state was at the time. So that would be letter B to describe the condition, emotional state, or state of being. This is the end of our video. Hopefully you took very copious notes and you will be prepared for the open note quiz tomorrow. Thanks.